On June 23, 2021, hydrogeologist Daniel Robinson drove away from a job site in Buckeye, Arizona. He was never seen again. Police believe he crashed, undressed, and walked off into the desert, possibly confused, possibly unstable. But what if they're wrong? What if the investigation was never meant to find answers? What if the crash scene was staged, the timeline manipulated, and key evidence quietly buried? In this video, we'll use verified data to dismantle the official story and reveal what really happened in Buckeye. This is the Daniel Robinson Project, Proof of Foul Play.
Daniel Robinson was last seen in June when he drove away from his job site, but the 24-year-old has not been heard from nor seen ever since.
Last time anyone saw him, he was leaving his work site. He was a geologist, young, vibrant, handsome, had his whole life ahead of him. And an expert that was hired by Daniel's dad, they found the data from the Jeep's computer, like the black box, said that somebody started that Jeep more than 40 times after the airbags deployed, and that someone drove it more than 11 miles after it first crashed.
No matter how much the family asks for this to be a criminal investigation, can you make that happen?
We can't make up evidence. Absolutely suspicious circumstances related to the case.
I need you to do something for me if you could. Can you not alert the media or his family or anyone that you found the Jeep?
Always felt like a cover-up from the Buckeye Police Department to me. And some other things I can't talk about in the public.
Are police still actively involved in searching for Daniel tonight? Where does the investigation stand on the law enforcement front?
The Buckeye Police Department has turned the vehicle and all of the evidence over to myself, my team. So I have all the evidence. So if they're actively investigating it, they don't have any evidence or anything to really investigate other than they can come out here in the desert with us and help us.
Is that customary for police to hand over evidence to a private investigator in a case like this or any other?
Not at all, no. I've never seen it in my career in law enforcement or as a private investigator.
Why would they do that, did they say?
They turned it over to us through Mr. Robinson and said, their exact words said, "We don't have an investigation, we're done."
It's 6:30 a.m. in the suburbs of Phoenix. 24-year-old hydrogeologist Daniel Robinson leaves his home in Tempe, Arizona. He's headed west toward Buckeye to inspect a series of remote water wells scattered across the desert. One of his first stops is a site undergoing inspection for a new well that's being drilled. After taking photos and calling his supervisor to report his findings, Daniel continues on to another location off Sun Valley Parkway. There, he's scheduled to meet pump technician Ken Elliott, who, according to Buckeye police, would become the last person to see Daniel Robinson alive.
My name is Ken Elliott. I'm a pump technician for Weber Water Resources. On the morning of June 23rd, we arrived at the job site at 9:30, and I walked over to Daniel's Jeep to introduce myself. We spoke about a few technical aspects of the job and where we were at on the development phase of this well. It was raining fairly hard at that point. I had asked him whether or not he wanted to just hang tight and let this storm cell pass overhead before we started so we wouldn't get all of our paperwork wet. This is where things started to become odd. When I looked up, Daniel was staring off into the desert. He had a very, very distant look in his eyes. That's when he got in his Jeep and left. Must have been around 2:30. The principal of the firm called me. They had not heard from Daniel yet. I hopped in my work truck. The only tracks were Daniel's because the storms had washed all the dirt roads clear. When I got to that intersection, my heart sank because Daniel's tracks didn't make a left and head east towards the home. They made a right-hand turn and headed west out in the desert. And I thought, he's so far out in front of me, he could be anywhere.
At around 9:45 a.m. on June 23, 2021, Daniel Robinson left the job site in his Jeep Renegade and drove west into the Arizona desert. Throughout the day, Daniel's co-workers, family, and friends attempted to reach him, but while his phone initially rang, he did not answer any calls or respond to texts. By the evening, concern had grown significantly, and at 7:04 p.m., Daniel's father, David Robinson, reported him missing to the Buckeye Police Department. David explained that his son had left the job site earlier that morning under unusual circumstances and had not been heard from since. The Buckeye Police Department initiated their investigation by contacting Daniel's workplace and conducting a search along Sun Valley Parkway near his last known location. After several days with no significant leads, David Robinson arrived in Arizona to begin his own relentless search for his son, driven by a determination to find answers. The search for Daniel Robinson involved a coordinated effort over several weeks. Civil Air Patrol aircraft scanned the desert from above, while teams in off-road vehicles and volunteers on foot covered miles of search zones. The Phoenix Firebird helicopter flew low over ravines and washes, guided by Ken Elliott's account. Maps of the operation detail the extensive area searched. Despite these efforts, no trace of Daniel Robinson would be uncovered until almost a month later, where a discovery in the desert altered the course of the investigation. On July 19th, 26 days after Daniel disappeared, a cattle rancher and his partner were working just 2 miles south of where Daniel's Jeep had turned into the desert. While checking their herd and repairing fence lines, they made an unexpected discovery: Daniel Robinson's Jeep Renegade lying on its side in a ravine. The pair immediately contacted the Buckeye Police Department, marking a significant turn in the search for Daniel.
When we found the Jeep, I called Buckeye, and they said, "What's the license plate number?" And I gave them the license plate number. And they said, "Yeah, that's the one we're looking for." I said, "Yeah, I know. I've seen it on the news." So I said, "Okay, let us call you right back." Okay. So they called me right back a couple minutes later. Talked to the detective, and the detective says, "Yeah, that's the one we're looking for." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, I'm here." I said, "There's no way for you to find me. Like, I can't give you directions that you're going to." But I'll send my guy up to the parkway, and I'll meet you on the parkway, and you can bring him. He can bring you down. I said, "Okay, I need you to do something for me if you could." He said, "Can you not alert the media or his family or anyone that you found the Jeep?"
Following that request by the Buckeye Police Department, the rancher met with detectives and guided them to the ravine where Daniel's Jeep was located. The rancher also noted that he didn't believe the vehicle had been there the entire time Daniel had been missing, suggesting it had only appeared in the days leading up to its discovery.
So when they tell me that, "Oh, we searched this area, we searched it, we didn't see it," well, no, you probably didn't, because it wasn't there. I'll bet whatever you want to bet that thing was not there.
So how often are you in that area specifically?
Every day, every week.
As you heard from the rancher, the Jeep wasn't in the ravine in the days prior to its discovery, something police themselves implied when telling him they searched that area before. Located just 2 miles from the turn Daniel was last known taking, The Jeep's position matched his anticipated path. Once more, this same area had been included in a prior search conducted by law enforcement, Civil Air Patrol, and the Phoenix Firebird helicopter. The vehicle's discovery introduced a series of inconsistencies, launching a wider investigation into Daniel Robinson's mysterious disappearance. It was only the beginning. As this investigation unfolds, we'll revisit the most critical pieces of evidence, placing them in context to better understand what the official story leaves out. Buckeye police told the rancher to keep quiet, not to contact the media or Daniel's family. At first, that might sound like a move to preserve a potential crime scene. But as you'll see in this video, the scene wasn't treated that way at all. And while Buckeye PD withheld that discovery, David Robinson was still out in the desert, searching, not knowing the Jeep had already been found. The rancher was clear. The Jeep hadn't been in the ravine in the days prior to its discovery. That's what he told David Robinson. Buckeye PD claimed the area had already been searched, suggesting they knew it too. But none of that was included in early reports. And when the rancher's statement finally appeared, it misrepresented what he actually said.
So, how often are you in that area specifically?
Every day.
These first pieces of evidence are just the beginning. Soon, we'll uncover patterns that suggest this case wasn't mishandled by accident. From here, the discrepancies will only continue. Police Detective Larry Biffin and several other officers arrived on scene at around 11 a.m. to examine the Jeep. The vehicle lay on its passenger side, its exterior strangely clean given the recent rainfall and the harsh desert environment. The damage included a shattered driver's window, a windshield smashed in 2 places, and deployed airbags. Beneath the Jeep, a roof panel had a boot stuck between it and the frame. Nearby, on a hillside, investigators found another boot, a shirt, a reflective vest with the Matrix logo, a pair of mismatched socks and jeans turned inside out. Daniel's wallet was in the pocket of those jeans. Inside the Jeep, police recovered Daniel's cell phone, car keys, a backpack containing his work laptop and documents, several bags of soil samples, a hard hat, multiple unopened water bottles, and other personal belongings. Investigators spent 18 hours at the ravine. They checked for any other signs of Daniel, collected his clothes in bags marked for safekeeping, and had his Jeep towed to the impound lot for further processing. It's important to note that despite the extended period spent on scene, no forensics were completed during that time. "24 hours after Daniel's Jeep Renegade was found overturned in a ravine, Detective Larry Biffin contacted David Robinson to inform him of the discovery. While meeting with David and taking him to the police impound lot to view the vehicle, the detective stated that they plan to analyze Daniel's cell phone and the Jeep's event data recorder, also known as a vehicle's black box, in hopes of uncovering any clues about what had happened or where Daniel may have gone. The EDR data, retrieved on July 21st, revealed key details about a crash. At the moment of airbag deployment, the vehicle was traveling approximately 30 miles per hour. More notably, after the airbags deployed, the Jeep's ignition button was pressed over 40 times, suggesting multiple attempts to restart the vehicle. Additionally, the odometer reading at the time of the crash was recorded at 58,154 miles. All 3 of these details are key elements moving forward. Keep that in mind as we continue our investigation. After analyzing the crash data from Daniel Robinson's Jeep, the Buckeye PD shifted their attention away from the vehicle itself and instead centered the investigation around Daniel's mental health. They focused on his sudden departure from the job site while highlighting statements from friends and family who had noticed a shift in his behavior in the days before he disappeared. Investigators also recovered deleted text messages with a woman named Caitlin, who claimed that Daniel had shown up at her home unannounced, forcing her to tell him not to contact her anymore. The Buckeye Police Department ultimately determined that Daniel had crashed his Jeep in the ravine, removed his clothes, and disappeared into the desert, either due to a head injury or mental health episode shortly after leaving the job site on June 23, 2021. Despite their own search efforts in the area and the rancher's testimony stating otherwise, they insisted the Jeep had been in the ravine the entire time Daniel had been missing. Buckeye PD's handling of Daniel Robinson's case was flawed from the outset, marked by inconsistencies, delays, and overlooked details. When we put these things into context, a clearer picture begins to emerge. For nearly an entire day, Buckeye police remained at the scene where Daniel's Jeep was found. They photographed it. They cataloged what they saw. They towed the vehicle out of the ravine. But what they didn't do is investigate. No fingerprint testing, no DNA collection, no analysis of the boots, the clothing, or the interior. Not even a basic forensic sweep of the scene. This was the vehicle of a missing person, found in a remote ravine, airbags deployed, personal items scattered uphill, and a witness saying it hadn't been there days before. Yet police never treated it as a potential crime scene. So why ask the rancher to stay quiet? And why wait more than 24 hours to notify Daniel's father? According to both the rancher and Buckeye PD's own reports, the area where Daniel's Jeep was found had already been searched. Major Lane of the Civil Air Patrol noted that locating Daniel should have been likely. He had a vehicle and a last known location. The Jeep would later be found just 2 miles away in clear view from the air. It's highly probable that Civil Air Patrol, the Phoenix Firebird helicopter, and ground teams all passed over the exact spot. Still, police insisted the vehicle had been there the entire time, overlooked by everyone. They never considered the possibility that the Jeep had been moved after the initial searches. The police say the Jeep crashed into the ravine and stayed there, but the onboard data recorded more than 40 ignition attempts after the crash. To start a Jeep Renegade, you need to press the brake and the ignition simultaneously. In a sideways vehicle, that's already difficult, nearly impossible for someone with one hand. And according to the police report, the Jeep was found in drive. That matters, because ignition attempts made in drive wouldn't even register. So, if it was in the ravine the whole time, why is any of that data there? When asked about this discrepancy, Buckeye Police Chief Larry Hall admitted they could not explain it. But we can explain it, and we will, later on in this investigation.
But the data also shows someone tried to start the car 46 times after the crash.
That's something we can't explain.
Begs the question again. The family is saying it's criminal. It's got to be, or he's in danger. Do something.
Right. No, I agree.
At this point, the facts raise legitimate questions about Buckeye PD's official report. The evidence, the timeline, and even their own statements reveal inconsistencies that can't be overlooked. While authorities stand by their version of events, David Robinson couldn't ignore the contradictions. His fight for answers is where the real story begins. "24 hours after discovering Daniel's Jeep overturned in the ravine, Detective Biffin finally made the call to David Robinson. When he asked why they hadn't informed him sooner, the response was simple. They didn't want to disturb his sleep.
They didn't alert me as a father who's been on the ground since June 26th. They didn't alert me that the find of my son's vehicle to almost over 24 hours later, which was on the 20th. It was hard for me because I remember back in doing interviews, I kept using July 20th, and I had to get corrected. Hey, no, that vehicle was found on July the 19th. And that's because they didn't tell me about my son's vehicle until over 24 hours later that it was found.
After his discussion with Detective Biffin on the phone, David drove to the Buckeye Police Department, where he was met in the parking lot. It was there that he was given details about the vehicle's discovery and their initial theory on what may have happened to Daniel.
Once I got to that police department, I spoke with Detective Biffin. He met me in the parking lot. He was armed with three things. It was 2 maps and 1 picture. With those 2 maps, he showed me the location of where the vehicle was found on that map. He said it was out in the desert, and it was in a remote area of the desert, and he showed me how the distance of how it would be from that Sun Valley Parkway. Once he started pull a picture out, the 1 picture he had, he explained to me, right here on the ground here is your son's clothing, everything he was wearing on his body. He asked me to say, do your son wear boxers or briefs? I told him I wouldn't know that. My son is a grown man. He said, well, everything on his body, down to his underwear and his socks, was on the ground in a pile. Inside the vehicle was his cell phone, and outside the vehicle, his wallet was in his pants. There was his work laptop inside the vehicle also. He explained to me that they didn't believe. He said the good news is your son has not sustained any injuries because there was no blood in the vehicle. And also we believe that he had a seatbelt on because the way the seatbelt's locked and, it keep him from, he had the seatbelt on. And, but they said, we believe he had a head injury, a severe head injury, and he kicked his way out the sunroof. And because of that head injury, he went to explain to me with a head injury, we get a brain injury, it causes you to want to shred your clothes off because you become hot and it make you want to shred your clothes off. We believe that he shredded his clothes off and he walked off naked and hid under a tree to cool off somewhere. And maybe he succumbed to his injury or some wild animal could have got him.
David was then taken to the police impound lot, where he was provided with another possible explanation for Daniel's disappearance and was shown his son's vehicle for the first time.
Once I got through that gate, before I get to the back area, he slowed down, he stopped me, he said, hey, I've seen things like this before. We've seen things like this before. There was a time a family thought a lady was missing, and it turns out that she just wanted to be away from her family, and she became a nun. And he said, I'm not totally saying about your son. He said, maybe he decided to leave your family, and wanted to join a monastery and become a monk. Once we got through that gate, he pointed out and said, hey, that's your son's vehicle over there. That took me really hard. It was really hard to see that vehicle for the first time. Y'all have to imagine, right before my son went missing, we had plans for me to come out to Arizona in July and, to see his sisters and himself. We was all going to have a good time together. My son wanted to show me his vehicle. He's very proud of that vehicle, and I was going to ride in it. So when I saw it at the moment, that's all I could think about. It was really hard to see that. So I was stunned. I couldn't move. I was devastated. The officer said, hey, go over there and open the vehicle. Go ahead and open the doors. Go ahead and look inside. I couldn't move. I was just stunned. So he walked about 3 feet away from the vehicle. I followed him, and he said, go ahead, lift those airbags. Go ahead and look in. I could not move. I could not touch that vehicle. But he was very persistent for me to do so. But he decided to take upon himself and lift the airbag that was sitting outside the driver's window. And he lifted it up. He said, point out some things. He said, you go ahead and look in. I still was stunned. He opened up the back door.
Then, rather than securing the vehicle as evidence, the priority was making sure David got rid of it.
I told him, hey, look, I had enough. I don't need to see anything else. Then that's when he proceeded to tell me, well, Mr. Robinson, if you don't get the vehicle out here today, you have to get it towed out here. If you get out here today, we're going to have it towed out to a store, we'll have it towed out, and you would have to pay a storage fee. At that moment, I was so devastated. I couldn't get my thoughts together. I begged him and say, hey, look, man, I just need to can you give me a few days? Give me at least about 3 days because I'm not from Arizona. I don't know where to take this vehicle. I had to contact the lien holders. My son is still making payments on that vehicle. So he after a brief time, he agreed with me to give me 3 days.
Following the demand to remove Daniel's Jeep, David was brought into a meeting with Buckeye's police chief and other officials, a conversation that would raise even more questions.
In the meantime, I did secure, through sources, a meeting with the chief of police at the time, his entire staff, and that was within those 3 days of them holding my vehicle, my son's vehicle. And in that meeting, as you know, the strangers, when I found out, when under recorded, and also had a witness there, there was no forensics done on the scene. I asked them why. They said because they didn't see any blood in the vehicle, didn't see with their eyes in the blood in the vehicle. I asked them as well, how do you know if my son was even driving the vehicle? Well, the smart reaction they gave to me is his vehicle is obviously driving. That wasn't satisfactory to me. I demanded fingerprinting. I demanded some kind of finger. Y'all didn't do it on scene. I demanded something. Give me some fingerprinting. They agreed to do that. They agreed to hold the vehicle for another 3 days to do the fingerprinting. But in the meantime, when I got the meeting, like I said, they gave me a partial report. And then they also promised, Chief Hall promised to give me the full report because they had done. Once the detective finalized the report, they would give it to me, which they did on the flash drive. The second thing, while I was in a meeting as well, before I could walk out, get out of there and take off, the detective put me to the side. Where you parked at? I told him where I parked. He came around with a truck and gave me everything that belongs to my son in evidence bags marked for safekeeping.
The days following the Jeep's discovery should have brought answers to David Robinson. Instead, they revealed serious issues with how the investigation was being handled. It might sound like negligence when you first hear that police waited over 24 hours to inform David they had found the vehicle. But their explanation, paired with how they handled the scene, makes it hard to believe it was just a mistake. Daniel's Jeep was discovered at 9 a.m. on July 19th. By noon, officers were on site. That entire day, David Robinson was out searching for his son, unaware the Jeep had already been found. Police had the vehicle. They had every opportunity to inform him. They didn't, and it wasn't because they were preserving a crime scene. They made no effort to treat it like one. So if they weren't investigating, why the secrecy? When Detective Biffen brought David Robinson to the Jeep, he encouraged him to inspect it, open the doors, look inside, even touch the vehicle. David refused. As of that moment, the vehicle had not undergone any forensic examination. No testing was done until days later, after David demanded it during a formal meeting with the department. In most missing persons cases, a discovered vehicle is treated as a high-value forensic asset, secured, documented, and carefully processed. But not in this case. Detective Biffen told David to remove the vehicle the very next day. No forensics were run. No black box data was pulled. The handling of the vehicle defied standard investigative practice, risking the integrity of any remaining clues. At the end of his meeting with Buckeye police, David Robinson was told they were done. No next steps, no plan moving forward, no investigation to continue. And then, without explanation or formality, they returned everything Daniel had left behind. No processing, no logging, no forensic review. Not a single item was treated as evidence. It was as if they had already decided that none of it mattered. Everything that just happened, finding the Jeep, recovering Daniel's belongings and meeting with police, took place in just 3 days. From July 19th, when the rancher found the vehicle, to July 22nd, when David Robinson sat down with Buckeye PD. That meeting made one thing clear. They were done with any real investigation. So David hired a private investigator, and almost immediately, the official narrative began to unravel. Jeff McGrath is a former Avondale police officer turned accident reconstructionist with 2 decades of law enforcement and investigative experience. He doesn't normally handle missing person cases, but when he saw the one photo Detective Biffen gave to Daniel's father, a Jeep flipped in the ravine, he couldn't ignore it.
Jeff, I know you're a private investigator and you have about 60 active criminal investigations open right now. You typically don't take on these missing person cases. What was it about Daniel's disappearance and case that motivated you to take it on?
Well, what it was I wasn't familiar with the case when I received the call. So I looked into it, and I agreed to meet with Mr. Robinson. And when I did, he showed me one photograph that was turned over to him by the Buckeye police. And from the minute I saw that photograph, I knew that he needed at least a vehicle accident expert in his corner to wade through this. And that's when I decided to take it, and my team and I jumped on it.
As part of his initial investigation, Jeff returned to the ravine where the Jeep had been found. His team fanned out through the surrounding area, searching on foot. On July 31st, they found something unexpected: a human skull, fully intact, lying in a nearby wash a few hundred feet away from the ravine. It wasn't Daniel's, but it confirmed what we already suspected. The area hadn't been searched thoroughly, and soon after, that was proven again. One of Daniel's socks was found, this time a few miles away, lying on the dirt road coming from the second well site.
One of my investigators and I were out here looking just around the desert for anything that would lead us to Daniel, and I saw this pallet over here that looked fairly new. Well, it was brand new, as a matter of fact. Didn't have any water damage to it. So I was curious about this pallet, and as I parked here, we saw something in that creosote bush right there, and I came over to look at it. And right here at the bottom was a faded, sun-faded. It was originally a black Nike sock, athletic sock. And it's obviously had been here a couple of months because the sun faded up the top side. But once we collected it and I compared it to the clothes that the Buckeye police recovered, it was one of Daniel's matching socks.
On August 4th, Jeff McGrath arrived at the Buckeye police impound lot to take control of Daniel's Jeep and begin his inspection. Though the vehicle had been released weeks earlier, it remained in police possession. Detectives were accommodating at first, until Jeff disclosed that he intended to remove the infotainment system for expert analysis. This system, distinct from the black box, stores a range of internal vehicle data, including time, mileage, and connected devices. According to David, this caused immediate pushback from the Buckeye Police Department.
I got Mr. McGrath, and I sent them up there to get the vehicle. They returned it over to me, get it out of their compound, take it to where he suggested where it needed to go, and just for storage and take care of it so he could do his investigation. And I had to pay for that. But then I got a phone call once he got up there. Of course, I think it was a Lieutenant Angel or somebody had to meet him at this facility. Once they had a conversation, I guess cops to cops, he's a retired or cop himself. And they had a conversation about what he planned to do to get information of what happened on this crime scene. They're going to pull the infotainment system out. And once they heard that, they just went haywire. The Buckeye, I don't know why they went crazy. They went to go talk to whoever, and they had to tell him, well, now we ain't going to release it. Barry ain't going to release it. And they called me from my hotel room, had me drive 40-something miles away to come sign a piece of paper so Mr. McGrath could pull it on out of there.
After retrieving the Jeep, Jeff transported it to an undisclosed location for a controlled inspection. He arranged for the infotainment system to be analyzed by an outside specialist, independent of law enforcement. Then he began examining the Jeep himself, and almost immediately, he found things that didn't line up with the official story.
What is it about Daniel's car that strikes you as off in terms of where it was found, the location, what was left behind?
Well, the damage to the vehicle, it didn't match the area that the vehicle was found in. It had some damage along the driver's side that is unexplainable by the detectives. It also had some intruding damage into the windshield that didn't match anything in the area as well. Plus, I also had the airbag control module report that tells me what that vehicle was doing 5 seconds before the airbags deployed and what was going on with that vehicle since the airbags deployed.
And what does that tell you?
It tells us that the vehicle traveled another 11 miles after the airbags did deploy on that vehicle. It also tells us there were 46 additional ignition cycles on the vehicle after the airbags came out, and that the the report says the vehicle was traveling about 30 miles an hour for 5 seconds prior to its final rest, or airbag deployment, I should say. And that's not possible in the area where the vehicle was found.
So piecing that information together, how do you think the car got there?
Well, I think the car got there by somebody was still driving the vehicle after the airbags came out. And if it was dumped intentionally or somebody was joyriding and that's where it ended up, and once it got there, you couldn't move it out from there, it tipped to its side. Or Daniel was in it. We don't have any proof to say that he wasn't, but we also don't have anything to say that he was in it.
But his cell phone, his wallet, his keys, all still left with the car.
Soon after Jeff inspected the Jeep, the infotainment data came in. It contained a list of time logs and matching odometer readings from 6:26 that morning to 12:54 in the afternoon. The last entry caught Jeff's attention. The mileage aligned with the recorded crash data, minus a small rounding difference. Jeff believed that 12:54 p.m. marked the moment of impact, roughly 4 hours after Daniel met Ken at the second well site.
We have also downloaded the infotainment system, which is the Uconnect that the phone connects into. And that is how we were able to confirm the time and date that the airbags deployed. And that comes out to be about 1 o'clock in the afternoon on June 23rd. He went missing on anywhere from 9:15 to 9:45 in the morning. And the Uconnect tells us that the airbags blew at about 1 p.m. So there's a time gap there.
Although Jeff McGrath pointed to the 12:54 p.m. infotainment entry as the time of the crash, Buckeye PD never publicly supported that conclusion. The police report does hint at that timestamp being significant, possibly even the crash time, but it stops short of making that claim directly. That distinction is critical as the case unfolds. Jeff delivered his full report to the Buckeye police. But their priority wasn't discovering what really happened. It was protecting what they'd already concluded.
I have turned all of my information over to the Buckeye police detectives because I wanted them to step up their investigation. Unfortunately, when I went to go out and process the vehicle the first time when it was still in Buckeye's possession, they turned it over to us through Mr. Robinson and said, their exact words said, "We don't have an investigation. We're done. We don't have a crime and we don't have anything to investigate." So they've turned everything over to us. I currently have all of that, what should have been marked evidence and should still be in their evidence lockers for review. But as we go through all of it, we just keep finding more and more. And I sat down with the Buckeye Police Department and detectives, lieutenants and assistant chief, and explained to them my findings. And all they want to do is brush me off. They don't want my information. And we've been trying to put pressure on them from day one. And this is unacceptable. If this were my child, their child, anybody else's child, I believe especially if it was their child, I believe they'd step up their investigation. But for this, they look at this as a young black man that they believe just wanted to disappear and join a monastery. Absurd. It's absolutely absurd what they believe. But we have been putting pressure on them week after week after week. We finally got Chief Hall to admit to CNN on record that there are suspicious circumstances surrounding this. They say now that they're investigating this, that they do have an ongoing investigation, and they still haven't asked me to see the vehicle. It seems that their concern was to get an expert 3 months after the fact that does the same work I do to come out, not to help, but to rebut my information. And that's frustrating to me. This is not a civil case where we have experts battling against each other on whose vehicle did what. This is a cut and dry case where there's a vehicle found in a ravine, the damage doesn't match the profile, and they want to go out and find experts at Jeep to say that the information they found is not an anomaly. It actually is very disturbing to me that they want to just keep pushing it back and defy anything that we come up with.
Armed with Jeff's findings, Buckeye PD didn't engage. They deflected. They brought in their own expert to counter him. On the 11-mile mystery, their police report proposes wheel spin, tow mileage, or a routine dealership anomaly. They concluded it meant nothing and dismissed Jeff's broader findings outright. They never wavered. Daniel crashed once into the ravine and walked away, naked. Jeff ended his work in December 2021, but his discoveries fueled everything that followed, including this investigation. While searching the area near the ravine, David and Jeff made a grim discovery: a human skull, just a few hundred feet from where Buckeye PD had already investigated. Buckeye detectives had spent 18 hours at the scene. 18 hours. And somehow they missed human remains in close proximity to the ravine. The skull didn't belong to Daniel, but it did belong to someone. Someone whose family finally got answers. One of Daniel's socks was found less than half a mile from where he met with Ken on the morning he disappeared. The sock didn't end up there by accident. It matched one from the ravine, and the same type Daniel had at home. But this one turned up near the second well site, nowhere near where the crash occurred. If Daniel left both socks at the ravine, how did another one make its way back to a place he visited earlier that morning? It's more than strange. It points to the possibility that Daniel never made it to the ravine alive. It suggests possible foul play. Buckeye PD dismissed it because it raised questions they had no intention of answering.
When I found the sock 3 miles away from here, that was Daniel's, the detective sergeant, Sergeant Hanneman, said, "How do you know it's Daniel's? You can't prove that." Well, I know it's Daniel's, and if anybody saw the sock, and I'm willing to show anybody the sock compared to the socks that we covered, and the socks that I took photographs in Daniel's bedroom, and you will say, yeah, that was Daniel's sock, absolutely. We don't find a lot of socks out here in the desert. It's not common. But yeah, we did find one 3 miles away. That to them was not any concern.
When Jeff mentioned pulling the infotainment system, Buckeye PD suddenly changed their tune. They had already released the Jeep days earlier, but now, faced with the idea of real analysis, they refused to hand it over. It wasn't until their own attorney stepped in that they backed off. Even then, they made David sign a waiver, a quiet move, but one that likely broke the chain of custody and let critical evidence walk out the door. They didn't want that system pulled for a reason, and when you find out what it actually recorded, you'll understand why. Jeff McGrath inspected the Jeep himself, and what he found was disturbing. The damage didn't match the ravine. The driver's side scrapes were wrong, the windshield impressions made no sense, and the airbags had blown at 30 miles per hour. A speed Jeff couldn't even reach when he tested the terrain in a proper off-road vehicle. He also discovered red paint transfer on the body, a sign it may have struck another vehicle or object. None of it added up.
Okay, the first thing I noticed was the picture that Mr. Robinson showed me where the vehicle was laying on its other side. And I saw this damage here as you look down with this mirror folded in. That's what I was saying. It didn't look right. It didn't match being tipped on the other side. And I saw this windshield from these pictures. And this is from some blunt force coming inwards to it, like someone threw a rock or something to that. I don't know, but something hit this here, which broke this and spiderwebbed this out. This window glass is the only glass that's completely broken out on this entire vehicle. And this is the opposite side that it tipped on. There's panels in the roof. They're solid panels. There's no glass in the roof of this thing. So it's just, there's release hatches inside, and you pull the release and then you pop the panels out, and that makes it almost like, I guess, a convertible. So this damage didn't look right to me. As we move around, this here, if you look low, this is probably the force that blew the airbags. Something, and it's only going to be about this tall. So it could be a boulder in the desert, but somebody ran into that with no braking at 30 miles an hour.
Jeff identified a critical inconsistency in the Jeep's data. The crash report showed the vehicle's mileage at the moment the airbags deployed, but the odometer reading on the dash was 11 miles higher. That means the vehicle may have been driven 11 miles after an accident severe enough to deploy the airbags. Jeff raised the issue. Buckeye PD dismissed it outright as an anomaly, saying the 11 miles bared no significance in the case. They floated theories, tow mileage, spinning tires. But none of them fit how the Jeep actually stores information. Their theories collapse under basic scrutiny, and we'll prove that in the next chapter.
Where are we going?
Down here is where the vehicle was recovered from.
Is that the glass from the car?
Yes.
When you looked at this accident, what are the discrepancies that you noticed right away?
I believe it was in more than one collision.
What does the data from the black box of the car tell you?
That there was 11 additional miles on the vehicle since the airbags came out.
What does that tell you?
That tells me it was crashed somewhere else.
Does that sound suspicious? What explains that?
Well, we had the national expert that came in and provided us his findings, and then they ended up speaking to an expert at Jeep, and the expert says, yes, sometimes that happens, and it's not unusual.
The Jeep's infotainment system logged 58,154 miles at 12:54 p.m. It matched the mileage in the crash data exactly. Jeff believed that timestamp marked the moment the airbags deployed, and that Daniel had been driving for nearly 4 hours by the time the first accident occurred.
From your analysis from the crash report, it gives you, I guess, information that the vehicle had a collision at around 1 p.m. on the afternoon of Wednesday, June 23rd.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That was airbag
Okay.
deployment. That was the airbag deployment collision. That mileage from the
Airbag
entertainment system in the
deployment, okay.
vehicle matches the black box mileage. We correlate those two to each other. It gives us a time in UTC. We do subtract the hours. I think it was -7 at the time, which puts it at about approximately 1 p.m. So now we have a
So
gap
we
from
have,
9:30 in the morning till 1 p.m.
The mileage match at 12:54 p.m. seemed like a solid lead, but once you understand how the infotainment system actually logs data, you'll see why Jeff's conclusion was wrong, and why what's in that system is the most important piece of evidence in this case. Up until now, you've seen a pattern: questionable decisions, overlooked clues, and unexplained inconsistencies surrounding the disappearance of Daniel Robinson. Some details are suspicious, others are concerning, but none of them on their own prove foul play. That's about to change. Over the next 2 chapters, we'll move away from witness statements and theories and focus on something that can't be disputed: the data. Daniel's Jeep recorded it. His phone captured it too. Different systems, each with their own logs. And together they tell the real story, a story that even the private investigator got wrong. And the Buckeye Police Department? They've chosen not to acknowledge it because they know what it means. What we're about to show you isn't speculation. It's the part of the case they've tried to bury. And once you understand it, you'll see why they want it to stay that way. The infotainment system in most modern vehicles serves as a central hub for music, hands-free calls, navigation, and more. If you drive a car made in the last 2 decades, chances are you have one. What most drivers don't realize is that these systems also record data in the background, data like ignition times and mileage. In Daniel Robinson's Jeep Renegade, that background data revealed something critical. As we showed earlier, the system logged multiple events on the day Daniel went missing. Private investigator Jeff McGrath believed the final log, at 12:54 p.m., was the crash, because the mileage matched the crash report. But that's not how the system works. Each time a Jeep Renegade is turned on, the infotainment system logs the time and the mileage at that moment, reflecting the distance traveled since the last start. At 12:54 p.m., Daniel's Jeep was started, not crashed, and it had traveled 24 miles since its last recorded start at 9:06 a.m. The 58,154 miles shown matches the crash data because the vehicle was turned on after the accident that deployed the airbags. Understanding this clears up a lot of the discrepancies we've seen so far. Remember those 40-plus attempts to restart the Jeep after a crash? There's a reason for that. The Jeep Renegade comes equipped with a fuel shutoff system that activates during severe collisions, like the kind that deploy airbags. When that happens, the vehicle won't start unless you follow a specific sequence outlined in the Jeep's own manual. Whoever was with the vehicle after the crash tried, again and again, to get it started. Eventually, they pulled the manual out and got it running at 12:54 p.m. Buckeye PD called these ignition attempts unexplainable because they didn't want to explain them.
That's something we can't explain.
Begs the question again. The family is saying it's criminal. It's got to be a reason danger. Do something.
Right. No, I agree.
And what about the 11 extra miles that showed up on the odometer, but not in any logs? That's simple. After being started at 12:54 p.m., the Jeep was driven 11 miles. Those miles were added to the odometer as the vehicle moved, but they don't appear in the infotainment logs because the Jeep was never restarted again. And they don't appear in the crash data because the crash happened before that drive. The police offered theories to explain those 11 miles. We could ignore them, but let's take a moment and debunk them instead. Spinning wheels after the crash? Nonsense. The fuel shutoff system would have cut the engine, and this was a Trailhawk model with the latest active drive technology, designed to prevent exactly that kind of behavior. Tow mileage? More nonsense. Daniel's Renegade had an electronic odometer which requires battery power. When the Jeep was found, the battery was dead. And a Jeep Renegade can't be flat-towed. It must be placed on a trailer. Even the private investigator acknowledged that.
And we know it was towed from the scene, but it was put on the back of a flatbed, so it wasn't rolled. So
Okay.
that eliminates any tow after the fact. Buckeye Police Department was not aware of the 11 miles. As a matter of fact, they asked me to send them a picture of the odometer because they hadn't seen it.
Other accident reconstructionists and Jeep technicians might say, a mileage discrepancy like this is normal, and they're right. But why it happens matters. Any vehicle with this system that's crashed, restarted, and driven again will show a difference between the crash data and the odometer. So yes, Buckeye is right that the discrepancy isn't unusual. They're just wrong about what it actually means.
Does that sound suspicious? What explains that?
Well, we had the national expert that came in and provided us his findings, and then they ended up speaking to an expert at Jeep, and the expert says, yes, sometimes that happens, and it's not unusual.
So what does the correct way to read the infotainment data tell us? And what does it prove? It confirms the Jeep didn't crash and stop in the ravine. It crashed somewhere else. Then it drove again, another 11 miles, before ending up in that ravine. That's what the data shows. The private investigator misread the time of impact, but he was right about movement after the fact. The infotainment system proves the vehicle was restarted after the airbags deployed and driven further. That doesn't automatically mean foul play. Daniel could have driven it himself after a crash. But the question isn't just what the data proves. It's why Buckeye PD refused to acknowledge it. They were given the correct interpretation in September of 2022. A year later, their new report claims those 11 miles bear no significance. That is a lie. The mileage proves a second location. It proves post-crash activity. It proves the original narrative can't be true. And it only gets worse. Because when you match the Jeep's infotainment data with location logs from a mileage tracking app on Daniel's phone, it doesn't just suggest foul play. It proves it.